Hello everybody, welcome to another video from the training department. I'm Adam, your training director. Today's video will be a general information video about the Ielts test. When we think about the Ielts test, we have two types of tests. We have the general or the life skills test, and we have the academic Ielts test. When you hear about Ielts in English, we'll be talking about the academic Ielts test. If you want to find out more about the life skills or general Ielts test, then you can do your research on the internet, but as INS English doesn't teach it, it will not be covered in this video. We'll look at the four skills: speaking, reading, listening, and writing, and we'll find out a little bit about each part of the test. Okay, let's start off with speaking. Okay, let's learn a little bit about the speaking test. Speaking test is 3 parts and it's about 12 to 15 minutes long. Part 1 is normally about information which is about the candidate. It's something quite close to the candidate. It's everyday information, and often these are quite short questions that you're not expected to speak for a very long time about, but again, you're not expected to give just one-word answers. Part 2 will be a question where you're given a question prompt and you will have 1 minute to make notes, and you will be expected to speak for at least 2 minutes. Don't worry, if you speak for longer, the examiner will stop you and then we'll go on to the next part. In this question prompt, it will give you some multiple prompts. For example, if we were talking about a question of who is your favorite teacher? Then you would have other prompts like, where do you know them from? What did they teach you? Why are they your favorite teacher? Make sure you make use of this time to make notes to help you speak. Part 3. Part 3 is normally related to part 2. However, part 3 will be more abstract and it will be asking you your opinion about something. For example, if part 2 was about education, like in the example of your favorite teacher, part 3 would be something more general, more abstract. Maybe it would be asking about education in your country, maybe it would be asking about the future of education, but it's something which requires a student to have an opinion, to share their opinion, and to talk about it in a developed way. Part 3, if you don't answer in a very, very long answer, they may ask you multiple questions. And that's okay. What you have to do is do your best and answer with all the English you have. Okay, next we're going to go on to the next skill, which will be listening. Okay, now we're going to learn about the listening test. The listening test is about 40 minutes long. Of that time, about 30 minutes will be spent listening, and just under 10 minutes is given to the candidate to transfer their answers from the listening paper to the answer paper. In this listening exam, there are 4 parts and 40 questions. And this is very important. You can only listen 1 time. Again, let me repeat that because this information is very important. You can only listen 1 time. Okay, let's learn a little bit about each of the parts. Part 1 is about very specific information. This will be about names, numbers, addresses, dates, times, money. Very specific information. Students must focus and listen. And it will be talking between 2 people. Part 2 is a monologue. A monologue means one person is speaking. Often in part 2 there will be a table completion question where you have to listen to a talk about something and fill in a table. Part 3 is normally academic focused. It is a conversation between 2 people, and this could be anything academic. It could be students talking to teachers, it could be students talking to lecturers, it could be students talking together, students talking to admissions officers. But academic vocab is your friend here. Part 4 is a university style lecture. This means that in this topic, it's likely to be a topic which you're maybe not familiar with. So when students are not familiar with a topic, the only thing they can do is listen and use all of their listening skills, which hopefully you have taught them and that you will learn in our Ielts teaching tips videos, to help them during the listening process. Listening is quite challenging, to be honest, especially as you can only listen once. That's why we've really got to focus on tips teaching during our lessons. Okay, next is the second receptive skill, reading. Okay, let's talk about the reading test. The reading test is 1 hour long. There are 40 questions and there are 2 or 3 texts which are between 2,000 and 2,500 words long each. Now, that's a lot of reading. So a big thing is to focus in our classes about teaching tips for reading quickly and making students familiar with the different question types. For example, some question types that could appear are yes, no, not given, where students have to say whether information is correct, it's not correct, or it's not actually in the text. They could be asked to match headings to paragraphs. In this situation, there will be more headings than there are paragraphs, so some headings won't be used. They could be asked to fill in a gap. Fill in a gap could mean to finish a sentence, complete a sentence. It could mean to put in a word in the middle of a sentence, or it could be to complete a summary. Something to really be careful about here is the grammar, as often the grammar will change as they rewrite things. Next is assigning ideas. So some ideas in the text could be assigned to different people, and then one of the question types is giving an idea and asking whose idea this is. Then students have to read the text and tell the examiner whose idea it is. There is another question type which is multiple choice. Multiple choice is simple, everybody's aware about this. And another question type which is completing a table. So students may be given a table and asked to complete this with information based on the reading. In the reading, if it's talking about anything technical, there will be a small glossary. A glossary is just something which provides the definition of unfamiliar or uncommon words. But again, this is a lot of words to read in a very short amount of time, so go over to our teaching tips videos to find out how you can make the best use of the time. Okay, next is our final skill, writing. Our last part we're going to talk about is the writing test. The writing test, we have 1 hour and there are 2 parts. Part 1 and part 2. Part 1, it's recommended you spend between 15 to 20 minutes on part 1. Part 2, it's recommended you spend 40 to 45 minutes on. The reason that this is recommended is because part 2 is worth double points. So you should be spending most of your time on part 2. Let's look at in more detail about part 1. Part 1 will be writing a small essay describing either a table, a pie chart, a graph, or it could be a diagram. You have to write at least 150 words, and this is a fact it's describing. This is not giving your opinion. So trend words will be very important here. Trend words, for example, like rising, decreasing, increasing, a sharp increase. These are very important for part 1. Part 2 is often an opinion piece. This could be asking to what extent do you agree with a statement. It could be asking you to discuss two statements and to give your opinion. It could be asking you about a problem and what is the solution to this problem. Here again, part 2 is worth double points. Please remember this. You have to write at least 250 words, and it's really important for this part for students to have an opinion. Something to be noted is that this is an opinion piece, but it doesn't have to be true. Ielts is a test of your English, it's not a test of your opinions. Okay, so one more time, that writing part 2 is double points, and minimum word count is 250. In general, you shouldn't try to write over that word count, because the more you write, the more mistakes you're going to be making. Okay, so that was a brief explanation about every part for the Ielts test. The next thing for you to do is go over to the Teaching Ielts Tips video so you can learn about how to teach each one of these parts to set our students up for success. Okay, see you in the Ielts Tips video.